Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is part 3 of our exploration into the Dyatlov Pass mystery. Jane has already explained the accounts and what we believe happened to the group leading up to their deaths. But now, today, we're going to be looking at the autopsy reports, which tell a very interesting story and trying to piece together exactly what happened. They're just a little bit of a warning. You're not going to see anything graphic here, so don't worry too much about that. But it is honestly very mild, but if you're sensitive to medical reports, it might be an issue for you. But you're just going to see some diagrams, and we're going to be talking about the autopsy reports in medical language, basically. So it should be okay for most of you. But I hope you enjoy this episode, and I'll see you next time.
Moving on to the autopsy reports now, because those are very interesting and also don't make much sense, especially given what their official cause of death is, which is in almost every case hypothermia. But if you read that, then it just doesn't sound like just hypothermia.
Well, one thing I want to say about hypothermia is I think it's true that if you get hypothermia just before you die, you start to feel really hot, so victims will take their clothes off.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot more sense with people maybe ripping their clothes off or like
that's true to certain. Yeah, you have a point. That's definitely the thing. It's called paradoxical undressing, I believe.
But it doesn't make any sense why they left the tent without any clothes.
Exactly. It also doesn't make any sense because those who were officially described as died of hypothermia, there were no clothes found around them. And it was just in 2 cases where there were clothes around them, and those were dragged off by others. And the other people, they didn't undress where they died, you know what I mean? Because otherwise that would make sense, right? I've seen some pictures in a different case where they were in the middle of taking off their socks and shoes and then died, and the clothes were scattered around them. But like I said, Igor, for example, they said it was hypothermia and he didn't undress. But that doesn't mean, yeah, sure. I mean, maybe in the other 2 cases, that was the case, that was a fact, but it doesn't match all of them. Now, just a quick info for the autopsy reports. I'm going to talk a lot about cadaver spots. Those are discolored areas on the skin where the blood pooled after the person died. So when a person died on their back, the cadaver spots would be on their back. Now, if they're in a different area, that would normally indicate they have been moved. But also keep in mind there is a controversy about this. Some people have a theory and say, I think even a medical examiner said that those spots could have been confused with frostbite because they act similar to cadaver spots when frozen corpse is being brought inside, and the color changes a little bit, but I'm not sure, and so it's not certain if they were moved, but some people had cadaver spots in a different place where they should have them, so just a heads up. And also, I'm leaving out some details on purpose, like the clothing they were wearing, because they were noted, just because I already mentioned that when they were found.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Also, I don't know, the length of their hair, for example. So, I also have some pictures. Don't worry, nothing too graphical, just to show you the areas exactly and where the injuries were on a 3D model. And credit goes out to the website again because that's where I got those things from. First, we have Sina. She was found laying on her right side, cadaver spots on her back. That's a perfect example of where it wouldn't make any sense if those are cadaver spots, which would indicate she was moved after she died.
Okay.
Frostbite on all fingers. Also, heads up, all of them, none of them were sexually assaulted. That was also noted. Just not, I don't want to mention it every time.
No, okay.
Last meal was 6 to 8 hours before death. No internal injuries noted, apparently. Now, it is numbered, so I'm going to say the numbers as well. The first one is a dark red abrasion on the right frontal eminence, so the forehead. In the book, it said bloody abrasion and bruise above the right eye. So sometimes it differs what it's described as. I'm going to quote the website because that's directly from the medical reports. I'm just going to make it a bit simpler, which is the book version if it's unclear. Pale gray area 3 times 2 centimeters above the right eyebrow is number 2. Number 3 is dark red abrasion on the upper eyelids. 4 is brown-red grays on the bridge and tip of the nose. 5 is numerous abrasions on the left cheekbone. 6 is bruised skin on the right side of the face. 7 is brown-red abrasion on the back of both hands in the area of the metacarpal phalangeal and interphalangeal joints, which is basically the knuckles. So the back of her hands and the knuckles.
Okay.
8, wound with jagged edges and missing skin on the back of the right hand at the base of the third finger, so the middle finger. 9 is a motorcycle. 9, frostbites on all fingers. 10 is a long, bright red bruise, 29 times 6 centimeters in the lumbar region, so the lower back, on the right side of the torso. So it's pretty much on her waist. It begins in the back and up to her her belly button. Now the website says the bruise looks like left from a baton. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, baton. Yeah.
Yeah, and but that's speculation, so I don't know.
I mean,
You know what?
if they're going on a hike and they're carrying heavy equipment all the time, they could get these sort of bruises from a fall or a slip or something like that potentially.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not like
I mean, that one is kind of weird, but
yeah.
somebody else I discussed this with suggested that she might have had a rope around her waist.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know, maybe there was something steep and she wanted to be secured by a rope. They found rope in the tent, I think,
Or
or in the storage side.
or drag something behind her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. So maybe that was caused by that. That's not too suspicious for me. That's why I don't like to speculate if it was a police thingy.
Mm.
Now in the book it also says both lips are bloody and swollen. In the report it says cyanotic red and swollen, so nothing bloody in the reports, but still. So just to show you an example of how different everything is. Now in the medical report it says all injuries caused during lifetime as well as in the agonal state and posthumously. Yeah. Now the thing is that the medical examiner sometimes seems to believe that because of hypothermia, they must have hurt themselves somehow in that agonal state. And also posthumously doesn't make much sense if everything they found on her body at least was bloody, because it wouldn't bleed if she was dead already. And the thing that I noticed and was later on confirmed by a medical examiner who investigated this case later was that those injuries on her knuckles and the bases of her fingers, those are actually I don't know, like a very distinctive signs that she's gotten in a fight. You know, I've been working
Yeah.
at a hospital for so long, for so many years, and I've also seen the pictures of the injuries. And whenever somebody had that kind of injury, you could always tell they were in a fight, because that's an injury. When you fall, you don't catch your fall with your fists, but
No.
you'd have some abrasions on the palms of your hands, and there's almost no accidental way where you can get that kind of injuries, other than that maybe you slam a door shut in your hand. That's the only way that such an injury could be caused, I think.
Okay.
Not just I think, I'm 100% sure.
Yeah.
And also, she's not the only one who had those things on her knuckles, and so it would be a pretty much big coincidence for all the people, all the hikers having the same injury from a fall, which is already kind of rare and weird, getting such kind of injuries. And also, on the base of her middle finger, there is like a torn piece of skin. And the thing that I immediately thought was, if you have a wound in that area and also abrasions like from a fight, usually when a piece of skin is missing, that's often from the opponent's tooth.
Oh yeah.
a wound caused by that. So that's just from my experience from
From
working in
your
the ER.
experience of fighting.
Fighting, yeah. No, but being in the ER is like every time somebody
Yeah.
had a wound in that area as well, it's like we need to know if you just punched a wall in anger or if it was a tooth
Yeah.
or a face you punched, because that would have been treated differently. That's why I know so well.
Okay.
And so this could be from a tooth, I think. But yeah, that's just my speculation. Okay.
Or a yeti tooth.
A Yeti tooth, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so this one is Rustem Slobodin. He was found on his stomach, cadaver spots on his back again. Frost by the mouth fingers, last meal 6 to 8 hours before death. Now, external injuries. 1, hemorrhages in the temporalis muscles. So um, on his head and the side, he had like a bleeding, like a hematoma.
Yeah.
2 is minor brownish red abrasions on the forehead. 3, 2 scratches are 1.5 centimeters long at the distance of 0.3 centimeters between them. 4 is brownish red bruise on the upper eyelid of the right eye with hemorrhage into the underlying tissues, so hematoma or bruise, whatever you want to call it. 5 is traces of blood discharge from the nose. 6 is swelling and a lot of small abrasions on both sides of the face. 7, bruises in the metacarpophalangeal joints, again, the knuckles
Yeah.
on both hands. Similar bruises are common in hand-to-hand fighters, again, quoted from the website. 8, brown cherry bruises, is what it says,
Okay.
on the medial aspect of the left arm and left palm. Now, that's something that, like I said, keep in mind. That's translation errors. I don't know. 9 is swollen lips. 10, bruises in the left tibia, that's like the shin, in dimensions at 2.5 times 1.5 centimeters. That's not shown in the diagram. 11 is epidermis is torn from the right forearm, skin is torn. 12, fracture on the frontal lobe, 6 times 0.1 centimeter, located 1.5 centimeter from the sagittal suture from the top. So that's on the diagram with the skull. Now the thing is, apparently there were, I think in his case, oh no, there were external injuries. He had that bleeding on the temporalis muscle, it says. Now, that's a quote from the website. Boris Alexeyevich Vozor-Zeny suggested that the fracture in his skull could be done with a blunt object. Medical autopsy further states that Slobodin probably suffered loss of coordination due to initial shock right after the blow that could speed up his death from hypothermia. However, the conclusion is predictably careful. Death of Rustem Slobodin is judged as a result from hypothermia. All bruises and scratches were blamed on last-minute agony. That's what I said before. Another thing is, in the book that I read, they also say that there was blood found around his right kidney, which is actually a pretty decent sign pointing towards he's being kicked in that area. Because kidney bleeding is just something that doesn't. I mean, it can happen from a fall. Just don't get me wrong, but it can result from that. That was, but nowhere mentioned on the website, and I just didn't have any time to also check the medical reports again. The autopsy reports, I mean.
Yeah.
Then another thing is that in the book it also says bleeding on his brain from the skull fracture, nowhere mentioned in the website. And also bloody foam in the lungs, which is a pulmonary edema often caused by strangulation or intense external pressure on chest while alive. That's another speculation done by the author of the book that I don't like. Just write edema and it's done. Just let the audience, yeah, think
Yeah.
for themselves what it might be if you read a book on that, I think. But yeah, that is something that pulmonary edema and also the hemothorax, so blood in the chest cavity, is mentioned in many autopsy reports and never mentioned on the website. And I think, the medical reports, the autopsy reports, they are poorly translated with lots of question marks in between, stuff like that. And also just some things that I don't understand. I mean, I do understand medical reports, but never been part of an autopsy or anything, so I don't know
No, yeah,
everything. And
you have
therefore
to
I
be an
can't tell
expert.
if it's, yeah, and I can't tell if it's, if that's accurate or not. I'm just telling you that that's what's mentioned for most of them, which would point in a whole different direction. I mean, I could see somebody falling and hurting their head, but why would they have like a pulmonary edema, which is often caused by strangulation? Um, like I said, that's just one can be explained by an accident and the other one can't, and that happens a lot of times in that case.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Igor. Igor was found on his back, cadaver spots on his back for once. Frostbite on all his fingers. Last meal 6 to 8 hours ago. Okay, 1 is minor abrasions on the forehead, 2 minor abrasions in the upper eyelids, 3 brown-red abrasions above left eyebrow, 4 minor abrasions on the left cheek, 5 brown-red abrasions on both cheeks, 6 dried blood on lips, 7 lower jaw had a missing incisor. The mucosa was intact, that suggests the tooth was lost long before the final trip. So
Okay.
they just know that. 8 bruised knees without bleeding into the underlying tissues. 9 both ankles had brownish red abrasions, size 1 times 0.5 centimeters and 3 times 2.5 centimeters, with hemorrhage into the underlying tissue. Again, that's something that would indicate it was inflicted while alive. Single incision 4 times 2 centimeters in the lower third of the right tibia, so the shin. 11 many small scratches of dark red color on the lower third of the right forearm and palm surface. 12 purple gray discoloration on back side of the right hand. 13 metacarpophalangeal joints on the right hand had brown red bruises. Again, that's the fight injury. Yeah, the website says to get a better idea of the injuries, just make a fist. This is the part of the hand which you use to hit someone. Well,
Yeah.
I don't use any parts to hit someone because I don't hit people. But yeah,
No,
I mean,
you
I get
just
what
you
they,
just use guns.
yeah. Wow.
That's a wild accusation.
I know. I don't know what's wrong with you. Now, 14. Left hand is purple brown color with brownish red bruises. 15 superficial wounds on the second and fifth finger on the left hand. 16 skin wound in the palmar surface of the second and fifth finger of the left hand. The palmar is always the palm side of the hand, and dorsal is always the back side of the hand, just so you know, in case it's Latin. I know Latin. Now, there were no internal injuries according to the website, but again, in the book under internal injuries, it's the bloody foam in the lungs is mentioned again. This pulmonary edema that's supposed to be caused by strangulation. But yeah, don't know why it's not in the website. Also on the website, in the medical report is mentioned amount of urine in the bladder about 1,000 centimeters times 3. So don't know how to say it in English, like with a little 3 on top of centimeters.
Yeah.
Which apparently causes is the points into direction of hypothermia, but I don't know. Either way, in this case, official cause of death is hypothermia, and I think in this case, this is almost the only case where it makes sense because he didn't have any major internal injuries, apart from the pulmonary edema, if that's true, if you can believe the book. Okay. Now, I'll move on to the next one. Okay, so this one is Georgi, which was found in the Sida area. He was found on his back, cadaver spots on his back, which is matching. Frostbite on both arms, both legs, all fingers, all toes. So he was badly frostbitten. Now, the thing is, I noted here the color overall is cyanotic gray. It's I don't know if I have to mention that all the time. The thing is just that the relatives of the dead have later on pointed out and said they have a weird color, like they've been tanned, and that's why I thought I might note that part. But yeah, all of them had different colors, so it just doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any. I don't know. It's not necessary to mention, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Last meal as well, 6 to 8 hours before death. So he had bruises on the forehead, uh, diffuse bleeding in the right temporal and occipital region, which is the back of his head and on the side, due to damage to temporalis muscle. They say bruise around left temporal bone. Tip of the nose is missing, but no traces of blood, meaning so people say it's probably bitten off by an animal post-mortem. The ears were frostbitten. Portion of the skin from the right hand is found in the mouth of the deceased.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people say it might have been somebody else's skin. The medical report says the piece of skin is missing exactly the wound on his finger.
Do you bite out that treatment for frostbite in some way? I'm saying a lot of
I've
ignorance.
never heard of that before, to be
No,
honest.
me neither. But yeah.
Some say it might have been to stifle a cry, but would
Okay.
you really bite that thing off then, or not just like bite softly? I have no idea. I've never been in a situation
I
where I
don't
had
either.
to. Back of the right hand is swollen. Skin abrasions on the fingers on the right hand. Palm of the right hand. Hand. Okay, it's bluish red color, dark brown skin, wound with jagged edges at the base of the thumb. So the palm of the hands were injured, like as if he was maybe climbing a tree. If you remember.
Yeah.
Middle phalanx, so the middle part of the fingers, 4 to 5 cutaneous wound with hard edges and charred surface. Detachment of a 2 centimeters epidermis on the back of his left hand. Abrasion right side on the chest, 7 times 2 centimeters. Abrasion along middle clavicular line at the edge of the rib of the right hypochondrium. It's medical terms. I don't know the English normal terms to make it easier. The middle clavicular line is the collarbone. That's what I can say.
Okay.
14 is abrasions, left wrist, back of the left hand is swollen, pink and brown red bruise on his left buttock. Okay, 10 times 3 centimeters, so maybe he fell off the tree. That would maybe match. 3 linear skin lesions with straight edges, sharp corners, and depth up to 0.3 centimeters. Inner side of upper third of the left thigh. 3 wounds with sharp corners on the inner side of the upper third of the left hip. Abrasion on the femur and tibia, so the leg, basically shin and upper leg. Abrasions on the inner thigh, left side. Edema on the left leg and foot. Burn in the area the size of 31 times 10 centimeters on the entire outer surface of the leg, on the left leg. That's a huge burn. Patches in area 10 times 4 centimeters of brown red epidermis peeling the back of the left foot. Second toe charged to dark brown color, and the tissue is dense to the touch. So the burn mark. The thing is that I've read somewhere that it must have been that it was a 3rd-degree burn, and now that's something that doesn't add up because in order to get a 3rd-degree burn, you'd have to burn your hand for a bit. So it's not enough to just accidentally touch a flame and then move your hand back again.
Yeah.
Like, and even if you pour boiling water over you, you'd often just have 2-degree burns, 2nd-degree burns. But 3rd-degree burns is often caused by like oil, something that you can't get off immediately, that sticks on your body for a while, and it's really hot, and that causes 3rd-degree burns. So whatever happened to him must have been caused by, maybe he was unconscious from the tree fall or fell from the tree, was unconscious and laid in the fire for a while.
It's
And
the bu-
others suggest it might have been torture, but
the burns.
speculation.
Yeah, the burns are a bit confusing. I suppose they could have used some kind of fire starting liquid or something if they were desperate to start the fire, and maybe there was an accident there. But yeah, they are
Yeah,
weird.
wasn't found near them. So,
Sorry.
but nothing was found
No,
near
yeah,
them.
that's
No,
true. That's true. Yeah, yeah. The burns seem really weird.
they are quite weird, yeah. And I mean, but on the other hand, if it was torture, uh, I don't know if it's possible in such a big area. Like you would have, somebody would have to make him lie in the fire, but that would eventually put it out.
Yeah,
To
I
be
know.
honest. So I don't know if I'm going with the torture theory here. Um, in the section internal injuries in the book, it says bleeding on his brain from his right temple to the back of his head. That's also mentioned in the on the website. But also again the pulmonary edema. I've googled that one, and sometimes it says if you're really high up, that can happen. But I don't think they were that high up. According to somebody else who researched this case, said that's like family trip height. It wasn't that high up,
Okay.
and pretty unlikely. But like I said, it was just some source. Don't know. Okay, let's move on to Alexander. He was found in the one of the four bodies found later in the creek. He was found on his right side and immersed in running water for about 2 weeks. So keep that in mind. Cadaver spots were on his back and right side, so it could match. Frostbite wasn't noted, and also not the last meal, obviously, because well, not obviously. I don't know why they didn't examine that in that case. Maybe they couldn't anymore because it was too long. No idea. Um, Now, number one is a lack of soft tissue around the eyes. Eyebrows are missing, and the skull bones are exposed. But first off, I want to say in those last four cases, they did microscopic examinations where they checked if the wounds are fresh or not, or, well, if the wounds were inflicted while alive. And in his case, Alexander, all of his wounds were post mortem, so no hemorrhages or also called prior bleeding in the wounds, which
Okay.
indicates that there were that might have happened because he was a bit decomposed. So second is the bridge of the nose is straight, nose cartilage is soft when palpated, so when touched, and has unusual mobility. The base of the nose is flattened with the nostrils compressed, and in the book it says compressed as if it was pinched closed. That's weird to imagine. In this case it says just flattened, but also, yeah, nostrils compressed. It was compared like if you put a clothespin, I think it's what it's called, on your nose.
Yeah.
That's how they were found. And also in the book they say broken nose, even though on the website they say this doesn't necessarily mean broken nose. But if I remember my time at the hospital, when there is an unusual mobility, then that usually means the nose is broken. But it's just my 2 cents. Three is open wound behind ear, again probably not while alive. And that's the thing. Number four is everywhere they say deformed neck, which always sounds super scary and creepy. Like, what? It's deformed, in what direction does it point? But that's where I trust the book more because they say crushed thyroid cartilage. And I checked that's also in the medical report. Nobody ever said it's a deformed neck. But the thyroid cartilage, that's the area of your Adam's apple.
Yeah.
And if that is crushed, then that often points into in that's a sign of strangulation, basically. That often gets damaged when somebody is being strangled. And I've checked that, not just with the book because the author likes to speculate, but I also checked often in autopsies, that's often a sign that points into the direction of strangulation. And but they're right, in the medical report they say deformed thyroid cartilage, but no deformed neck. It's just a part of the neck, just so everybody knows. No, the neck was not weirdly, abnormally deformed. It was just the cartilage part.
Okay.
Five is diffuse bleeding in the underlying tissues of the left knee. Six, softened and whitened skin, so maceration of the fingers and feet, which is, yeah, probably because of the wet environment. Now, internal injuries, again, according to the book, is the pulmonary edema, again, which is, according to the author, caused by intense pressure, and hemothorax, again, the blood in the cavity, chest cavity. And also, like I said, the crushed thyroid cartilage. Now, the autopsy report says, and I quoted this, the neck is long, thin, deformed in the area of the thyroid cartilage. And that's what people get wrong all the time. In his case, they made a radiation test because people said that, maybe radiation played a role. And the waistband of his gray sweater and the bottom part of his blue ski pants were tested. Now, radiation always has different kind of particles. There could be alpha particles or beta particles or gamma particles. I don't know anything about that. I'm just letting you know in case you know more than I and want to know for certain. Beta particles double the normal range detected on both the tested cloth pieces. Although the numbers dropped by half after being immersed in running water for 3 hours. So when they have been covered in water for 2 weeks, nobody can tell for certain if a huge chunk of radiation was already washed off and might have been higher initially.
Okay.
So if it already, when it's tested after being in water for such a long time, the beta particles were double the normal range, then I'd assume that it was way higher in the beginning, but I don't know. Maybe they just got radioactive stuff on them afterwards. I don't know how that works. In the nature, there's a lot of radioactive particles. And they even tested a local corpse, somebody who wasn't involved in this, to compare. And to compare the normal numbers, especially when they checked the bodies for radioactive stuff. Next one is Nicolai. He was found on his back, again in running water, cadaver spots on his back, frostbite not noted. External injuries were an open wound on the upper left side of the mouth, exposing the teeth and gums, and like a bruise on the lower forearm. Internal injuries were a skull fracture of the right temporal area, a bone fracture of 3.5 inch by 3 inch by 1 inch deep. So the bone is pushed into the cranial cavity, so like in the brain, with bone splinters throughout. But there was no external injury.
Okay, that's weird.
Very interesting, so maybe inflicted after death. Don't know. Extensive bleeding on the brain due to skull fracture and no bone fragments. Okay, so apparently it was inflicted while he was alive, because otherwise there wouldn't be any bleeding. Again, pulmonary edema, and also dry heart, which is blood flow to the heart was abruptly cut off, causing damage to the heart itself. A dry heart is the sudden deprivation of blood, just in the book though, not mentioned on the website. The macroscopic examination says the exposed wound, so the one on his face, was examined. Hemorrhages, so prior bleeding, found in this area, meaning the injury occurred while he was alive. Radiation test, bottom part of his wool winter pants were tested, all numbers within normal range. But like again, they were immersed in water. Maybe there was some radiation before, nobody knows. And in his case, the official cause of death is skull fracture with bleeding. So first time, no hypothermia, I think.
No hypothermia.
Nope. Official cause of death is skull fracture.
Okay. So that's.
And in his case, I've read somewhere somebody said the force needed to create such a fracture, you can see it in the picture, would be the force of a car crash or something so severe. I mean, it's discussed if I think the medical examiner was interviewed later on, or a medical expert, and they were asked if somebody could have caused this by smashing a stone on his head or something like that, and they said, well, yes, but there would have been an external injury then, and there wasn't any there. So people say might have happened during a fall because he fell and on a hard surface, but in that case he'd have an external injury as well, I think. No, I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, now next one. So that's Simeon, also found on his right side in running water, cadaver spots on his back and right side of chest. Now, first injuries, his eyeballs are missing.
Okay.
Second one is missing soft tissues around left eyebrow, size 7 times 6 centimeters. The bone is exposed. Open wound on the right side of the skull with exposed bone, 8 times 6 centimeters in size. 4 is flail chest, broken ribs 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the right side, with 2 fracture lines, which is very interesting, and also the nose pinched close again, apparently. The internal injuries were, again, the ribs, the pulmonary edema, hemothorax, again, the bleeding in the chest cavity, and hemorrhaging in cardial muscle. So bleeding in the cardial muscle. Now, this is one of the few cases where I'm saying, okay, the hemothorax, the bleeding in the chest cavity, and the pulmonary edema would make sense and point towards an extensive pressure on the chest area because he has these broken ribs.
Yeah.
That's something that, I mean, an accident could have caused this, but I don't know what kind of. I mean, it's just
falling out tree.
intense. I mean,
if you fall
yes
down
and
somewhere
no.
and land on a rock.
No, that would have caused an external injury in that area,
Hmm.
first of all. And second is that would probably cause a break on the rib where he met the rock,
That's true. Yeah.
just in one area, because the weakest spot then just, gives in. But for that kind of fracture, it would have been like a compression, I think, Imagine you try to break a twig. That's like a rib, and you'd have to,
Yeah.
just
No,
never
I
mind
see what
me.
you mean. Yeah.
Another thing is the macroscopic examination is like the exposed wounds and ribs were examined. So there's hemorrhages, so prior bleeding, found in the open wounds, which means the eye sockets and the ribs. So both occurred while alive. So somebody took his eyeballs out while he was living. And that's something that baffles me and everybody who reads about this case. Radiation test was normal.
Now I'm thinking about the eyeballs. Not nice.
No, not really. Another interesting thing about him, oh yeah, the cause of death, by the way, is rib fractures, internal bleeding into pleural cavity, so the chest cavity. Another interesting thing about Simeon is that tattoos were found on the back of his right hand near the thumb, on the back of his right forearm and the left forearm. I don't really know what they mean because they're just letters and a picture of a beat, for example, and a star. But I mean, so far not that interesting, right? But the thing is, there's pictures of him where his right hand is shown while he was alive still, and there are no tattoos. And his niece, for example, doesn't remember him having any tattoos.
So now he's got these random tattoos on him.
But they're not fresh. They weren't new.
Okay. That's weird.
Yeah, keep that in mind for the theories later on.
Not him.
Okay. That's what people believe. That could be a thing. Now, but there's a whole different story about this that we might discuss the next time. Now, this is Ludmila. She was found on her stomach in water, cadaver spots on the back. Doesn't match if it's cadaver spots. One is soft tissues are missing around the eyes, very similar to Simeon. Eyebrows, nose bridge, and left cheekbone partially exposed. Damaged tissue around left temporal bone, so the left temple area. Eye sockets are empty. Eyeballs are missing. Nose cartilages are broken and flattened. Soft tissues of the upper lip are missing. Teeth and upper jaw is exposed. Tongue is missing.
Right.
Ribs. I'll explain. Ribs 2, 3, 4, 5 are broken on the right side. 2 fracture lines are visible, very similar to Simeon. 8. Ribs 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are broken on the left side. 2 fracture lines are visible. 9. Massive hemorrhage in the heart's right atrium. It's 10. Bruise in the middle left thigh, size 10 times 5 centimeters. Now, the internal injuries are the diaphragma of the mouth is missing. So that's the bottom of the mouth. It's called mylohyoid. Mylohyoid.
Okay.
Mylohyoid. I don't know. Mylohyoid muscle that connects the bottom of the mouth to the hyoid bone in the neck. It's like a delicate little bone. That bone is mobile in her case. That's the bone is on the top of the neck, just below the jawline, which is, according to that book, sign of strangulation. No one knows, but some people say it's just mobile because the tongue was missing. Yeah, that bone is also exposed because tongue and missing. Crushed thyroid cartilage, again, that thing like they described in the other case with deformed neck and all that. Again, the pulmonary edema, which in her case makes sense again. 1.5 quarts of blood in the chest cavity, again the hemothorax. Blood on the sternum, which is the middle part of that connects the ribs. You can see in the picture, it looks like a tie. Heart was pierced by one of the broken ribs, causing a 1-inch hole in the right ventricle. So the microscopic examination is interesting. The exposed wounds, which means the hyoid bone, heart, and ribs, were examined. No hemorrhages in the hyoid bone, so the part about the tongue, it's like, because she was so long in the water, people believe it's probably caused post-mortem, and so that's nothing supernatural, weird, or something. But there was hemorrhages in the open wounds in the eye sockets, heart and ribs. So that was inflicted while she was alive. So again, eyes taken out apparently while she was still living. Now the radiation tests, a jacket that was wrapped around her leg, the torn black pants, and both the gray and brown sweaters were tested. The brown sweater was positive for beta particles in excess of double the normal range, but again, exposed to water and all that stuff, like in the other case. It was believed that the sweater belonged to somebody else in the group because she was wearing clothes from the other people, partially ripped them off of somebody else. The official cause of death in her case, extensive hemorrhage, multiple bilateral fracture of the ribs, pierced heart, and internal bleeding in the thoracic cavity. Now, regarding Ludus and Simeon's similar injuries from the website, quote, excerpt from the interrogation of forensic expert of the Regional Forensic Investigation Bureau, Boris Vozrosteny, led by Junior Counselor of Justice and Criminal Prosecutor of Sverdlovsk region, May 28th, 1959. So there is questioned, how is it possible to explain the cause of the damage to Dubonina, which is Luda, and Solotariev, which is Simeon? Is it possible to combine them into one cause? And he answers, I think the character of the wounds in Dubinina and Solotariev, a multiple fracture on the ribs, on Dubinina were bilateral and symmetrical, and on Solotariev were one-sided. Both had hemorrhaging into the cardiac muscle, the heart muscle, with hemorrhaging into the pleural cavity, chest cavity, which is evidence of them being alive and injured, and is the result of the action of a large force similar to the example used for Thibaut Brignol, which with the head fracture. Those wounds, especially appearing in such a way without any damage to the soft tissue of the chest, are very similar to the type of trauma that results from the shock wave of a bomb.
What, a bomb?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know, it gets weirder and weirder. I know. I don't know. That's what I said.
Did
The
they
further
teleport
you go,
somewhere? They found
you're
the
you're
door
joking,
to.
but that's theory. I'm not kidding.
They found a door to another dimension and then came back.
It's so funny. Like I said, you're joking, and I don't take it seriously as well. Some people believe that.
Okay. Well,
I'm not making fun of them. Believe what you want. I'm just saying, it's just, to me personally, it's impossible.
I know. It's just when you don't
yeah.
understand things, you have to look for explanations, and that's when people start to come up with these weird explanations.
I know, exactly. Yeah. So one thing I'd like to mention about the autopsy reports is that in one source I've read that the hematoma, the bruises around the knuckles, those fighting injuries. I call them fighting injuries because to me there's no other explanation. You can believe whatever you want, obviously. But the bruises around the area sometimes I couldn't find anything about it, but some sources say the bruises were greenish, of greenish color, which would imply that those bruises were caused 10 days prior. And that doesn't make any sense to me because we've discussed this, we've seen the dates, and if they died on February 2nd or 1st, that must have happened the day that Yuri left. Yuri Yudin, the guy who didn't join,
Yeah.
or some point before that. So before the actual hike, they must have fought someone, but it wasn't mentioned anywhere, and so many of them had those injuries. And according to this one source, can't remember which one, the bruises were like greenish and so old, and I don't know. Doesn't make any sense to me because they would have mentioned surely somewhere in the diaries, if all of them was published, that they fought someone.
Yeah. Or although if they fought someone and didn't want anybody to know about it, they wouldn't put it in their diaries. So
Yeah.
they could have got into a fight and just maybe a couple of them were injured and they camped out for longer than they expected. I don't know.
I mean, I've seen a lot of pictures that they've taken along their journey, and you would surely see some injuries on their hands on some pictures. I mean, they were wearing gloves in some pictures, obviously, and you can't clearly see. And I have to check all the pictures now, which I'm not going to do. Well, there's one picture of Sina where she's taking a picture herself, and it is smallish, and you can only see her left hand, and I'd have to check with the medical report. Where she's holding a camera in her hand. I don't see any bruises on her hands.
Okay.
So, I mean, I didn't do any thorough research right now. I'm just fact checking that a little bit. There's another picture of Sina where she's writing in her diary on the journey already. And there we can see both her hands. I'm going to send you the picture afterwards. Yeah, she's holding her diary and writing in it, and you can't really see any bruises on her hands.
Hey everyone, Arrow here again. So I'm going to cut the episode here. In the next episode, it will be our conclusion in this series, and we're going to be talking about our theories about what we think happened to the hikers. So don't miss that one. But thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.